So the Smith-Morra Gambit, it's an incredibly aggressive line by white and isn't really played too much in the top level, partly because it's not so good with perfect play, but you really need to know how to defend against it, and there is a ton of tactics that are really uncomfortable. So how does the line go? So e4, c5, d4 gets played, and this is obviously not traditional because usually white plays knight f3, d6, and then d4, so they can take with the knight. But in this situation, they go immediately with d4, c takes, and this looks a bit counterintuitive because after queen takes, you can get the tempo and development. So what white does instead is they go c3. And so the idea here is let's get some fast development. Let's open up the d file and let's put some pressure on the white king with knight f3, bishop c4, etc. So we play knight c6. If you play knight f6 here, there's just e5, and you have to go back. The whole point of this line is that you are trying to stop black from developing quickly, but that's why you have to avoid knight f6 because there is just an easy attack. And if, for example, you play knight c6, bishop c4, and then you play knight f6, then there is this cunning trick where black plays knight f3, d6, and then e5. Knight takes e5, pawn takes, and then bishop takes f7 tactic. King takes, and then white wins the queen on d8. And this is not something you want to get yourself into, and to be honest, this has happened a lot in history, so don't fall for these tricks, and that the way to do that is by playing e6. So what's the idea behind e6 and not knight f6 or d6? We know that knight f6, the pawn has to come out, or the pawn eventually comes out and attacks the knight. We know with d6 there are always these tactics, but with e6 it's actually a really smart play because you stop the crucial d5 and f5 squares, you stop this bishop, while also a solid development move for your side. And let's actually have a look at how this proceeds. Here, white continues with traditional development. You play a6 here, and the idea here is actually we can actually develop on the queen side, and we can leave our king in the middle in a lot of lines, and that's because we know some of white's tactics. White's tactics is to blow open the middle, and they often do things like knight d5. And when we know that we can't develop in a traditional way, i.e. with knight f6, because we get bullied out, we start to develop on the queen side and start attacking white's pieces. So let's have a look how this actually plays out. So after castles, we play b5, bishop b3, and here there's multiple moves, and a lot of them are fine, but I want to show that knight a5 is what I think is best. But what if you play bishop b7? It is fine, but there are some things that you really need to look out for, and that's for the cunning knight d5 immediately. And if we actually look at the Ultra database, this has been played. This has been played 16 times in history. Yes, it's not particularly good, but if you don't know how to play against knight d5, it gets extremely ugly very quickly. And that's because the idea here is that actually white is going to open up this e-file and then be able to push d6 while we've got a pin. So for example here, if one of the lines is e takes, but this is actually a mistake, and white is slightly ahead now, which is wild because there are down a pawn and a piece, but it just doesn't matter because of this. E takes d5, knight to a5, rook e1, and look, the rook's just directly on the king, and after bishop e7, d6, we are not in a comfortable position. So this bishop is gone, so we're going to lose the piece back. And look at white's pieces here. We've got one extra pawn once we get this pawn, but these pieces are looking extremely deadly. You really are going to be very close to a loss here. And I just kind of showed this line where if you look at the situation, black has not castled. They are not going to keep the piece, especially after you can't really move. For example, let's say you go queen b6, pawn takes, knight takes, and then you've got this deathly pin. Then you've got the bishop g5 lines where you almost get forced into either an f6 or a knight f6, but then the knight's kind of protecting the bishop, so you're just tangled within yourself and you can't really move. This is not a position you want to get into, and that's simply because black decided to take the knight on d5. And usually you can take the knight on d5, but the crucial element here is that when you take the knight on d5, the pawn is immediately attacking the knight. Because of that, you have to spend one move running away, and then the pin comes in. And I'll show you a line later where the knight's not on c6, where you can effectively go d6 the next move, and then you're free to develop it in a more traditional way. Bishop e7, knight f6, castles, or king f8. Let's actually cover that because that's really important. That's why I suggest instead of bishop b7, knight a5 immediately. And here there's many lines, but you will probably come across bishop c2 a lot, where white thinks that white should keep the good bishop and try and maintain an attack. But here you just go bishop b7, and you have noticed that we are not developing on this side, and it's again because of the idea that actually white is still going to try and break through one way or the other. And secondly, the knight doesn't have a good square. So we just try to continue to develop on the queen side while we say to white, kind of show me what you've got, where are you gonna push. So white does have the move knight d5, but here this doesn't work because after takes, the knight is not on c6 anymore. And so here we can just go bishop e7, and after rook e1 we go d6. And the key difference here is that this pawn doesn't come to d6 anymore. You've got an extra piece compared to white, and actually you manage to hold on here. So after bishop g5, you can play something like knight f6, or just right now you can start to play king f8, knight f6. But generally the idea here is, and I've seen this across many lines, is to go rook c8, knight c4, queen c7, king f8, and then knight f6. And part of the reason we go king f8 and not castle is because we still want to protect this bishop on e7, and we don't always have the easiest routes to do that, especially if the knight's on f6 and the king's on g8. But let's go through. So we've just said that after bishop e7, knight d5 doesn't work. I've seen e5 a lot, but again, we're actually comfortable here, right? We don't have the knight on f6. So we are not losing the tempi there, and you'll notice that the moves that are going to be played next are still very much developing the queen side. So rook c8, knight e4, so this is the idea of trying to come into the square, but it's not that scary anymore. We've always got knight c4 to protect that d6 square, and we've got another kind of really nice trick, which is let's just do knight d6 just to see what would happen. But the big difference here is that the rook is attacking the bishop. So after bishop takes d6, you can't take with the queen because of rook c2. So you have to take with the pawn, and here you can go knight f6 and castle. And actually this center is now blocked again, and there is really limited progression by white. And so after knight e4, you might not go, you won't go knight e6 immediately, but you might go rook e1, and this is where you play f5. So another kind of idea of how to break out from the kind of trapped area that you're in. And this is really nice because after something like knight g3, you go g6, knight d4, queen c7, and you'll see that actually we maintain a solid structure here, but you do have to be a little bit careful, but you'll bring your knights to c5. But nonetheless, like if you look at this position, white doesn't have like a clear route to progress, and you are just a pawn down, so you've kind of survived there. And so what about if they don't play e5? Let's just do queen e2, rook c8, rook d1, and this is the idea again that, you know, the queen's on the e file, the rook's on the d file, you've got knight d5 incoming, potentially, this time with a check. So here we go queen c7, and after e5, again we play f5, and this is that kind of the consistent idea here that we can break through on white by using f5 instead of something like d6. And now after knight d4, we go knight c4, and knight f5. This is a cunning trick where we are effectively trying to take bishop takes and then kind of queen h5 types of ideas. And you can also do kind of takes in e6. But here we just take the pawn on e5, and actually we're slightly better here. We've still got the pawn up. We're going to develop normally now with knight f6, bishop e7, bishop c5, castles, and actually that big breakthrough in the middle, it's not here. And so let's do rook e1. So we covered bishop c2, bishop d5 after knight a5, and now let's just do rook e1. And this is, some people play this in the sense that they're okay, they just want to develop as quickly as possible. And we take, so we get rid of the bad bishop, but now if you look, white has almost entirely developed all of his pieces, but black hasn't. And so this can be extremely difficult for a beginner, but the crucial element here is that actually white doesn't have a clear-cut way through. And so we continue with the idea that we develop the queen side first, and we wait for white to make a play. Bishop f4, bishop e7, e5, and again, it's that same idea. e5, you counterattack with f5. And so the common theme here with black's play is you develop the queen side with rook c8, often with knight a5, knight c4. You wait for e5, you don't go with knight f6, you wait for e5 and go and counterattack with f5. And here is where you have those ideas of g5. But again, it's all very much dependent on your position. But the overall strategy here is let's play e6 first. Let's not do d6. Let's not do knight f6 early on. So that's here. Let's play e6, not knight f6 and d6. Let's play knight b5, kick the bishop out. We develop on the queen side. We wait for the e5 to strike back with f5, and we put the knight on c4. So these are kind of the general kind of ideas that black can come up with. Still a very complicated position, but the idea that kind of white just blows away black should really be minimized with the 6 b5 knight a5 line.